Had she heard correctly? Osrith looked between Owain and Anarord for a moment, questioning her hearing. Map Diffenwyl? Diffenwyl made you welcome, did he not? Oh, dear yes, because he is such a kind-hearted man. He came to us, you know, when Eochaid was subdued by Domhnall, after the rebellion. He was so diecast, was Diffenwyl. So I treated him as son, the last of his line, of the Henoled. And he found out about you, oh yes he did. Come, Anarord added, scooping his hand behind Owain and Osrith, ushering them along, as if the men 300 yards away would have been able to hear otherwise. So very aware of his responsibilities, Diffenwyl, and the independence of Strathclyde. Which is why he courts the Norse, oh yes he does. This is why Diffenwyl tried to keep you at Glashku, yes he did, the king continued, for the little parcel you nurture in your stomach, a potential heir, for he is unmarried. So he has no heir of his own, Osrith concluded, unable to help liking this king, so ebullient in his manner. And that's where he is wrong, you see? But Osrith saw something else, too. If Diffenwyl had an heir which, if Anarord was implying, was Owain, who was unknown to him, it stood to reason that Hywel wanted an heir to Strathclyde too. You have seen Diffenwyl recently, how is his reign? Desperate, Osrith agreed. And does not know about his son? She smiled kindly down to Owain who, like Hywel's Owain, must have been about 12 or 13. But Anarord did not answer. Instead he looked silently at Osrith for a moment. I would speak to you on the very delicate subject of your child, particularly its father, Anarord said at last. A gale, Osrith replied, warily, and Osrith saw that Anarord had raised his arm above his head. I am speaking to you as if you are my enemy, for the benefit of my own enemy, Anarord said. I will pretend to shout at you, kindly react in an appropriate manner. With his hand, he pushed Owain away, and she saw Hywel wink at the boy. Sorry? Osrith blinked, not following. I said, yield to me, Anglish bitch. Anarord shouted at her, raising a hand. Osrith, catching on, pretended to cower. Good. Now listen, Anarord continued, pulling her roughly to him, his fingers, however, gentle, with no force behind them. Hywel would take my kingdom. Owain is the son of Diffenwyl and son of my beloved daughter, Angarad, he added, and pushed her away with no force, and Osrith saw to it she flailed and stumbled. You are not. He shouted back to Osrith, then encouraged softly, come at me. Osrith withdrew tagged seeks, holding it low in front of her, but allowed the old king to knock her hand and the blade tumbled out of it, falling on the soft, green grass. He dragged her to him again, and Osrith laughed internally. They were noticed by Pylig, who was beginning to make his way up the hillock, slowly at first, and then quickening as he saw what looked like the king of Gwynedd assaulting her. Anarord hissed into her ear. My son is waits only for me to die to ally with Hywel, but my nephew is far stronger, with his Wessex allies, than I will with my armies. Hywel will not ally, but overthrow him and take all of the kingdoms of the Cymric. Next kingdom. Strathclyde, Osrith concluded, grimly. Owain? She asked. They would seek to destabilize Alba, place Owain on the throne to control a third of Constantine's realm, Anarord concluded. Now I am going to let you go and you must shout back to that priest that you are well and for him not to come any further. Osrith did so. Pylig stopped running, and looked at her. The king will send me down to you unharmed, she added, translating that back to Anarord, but he answered, yes, in Cymbric faster than Osrith had time to finish. So he knew some English then, she thought, before turning to the king. What would you do, Osrith? Anarord asked her. Pretend to hit me, your grace. I would have done something unacceptable by now, like called you a liar, or the like. Anarord gave her a disbelieving look, then threw back his arm into a punch. Osrith moved away just in time to miss the impact, and his gloved hand skimmed her cheek. She pretended to reel and held her face. Take him with you, to Constantine. Osrith was pretending to get back to her feet, when she looked up, sharply. Anarord made to help her up, to show conciliation, and repeated them. And what would Owain want? Peace. And it can only be achieved by taking his heritage and moving on. He knows who his father is, and his responsibilities. Find a way back for him. Osric looked to Owain Mab Diffinwyl, who was smiling and nodding. But Osric shook her head. Not I. My agreed task was. Yes, with Constantine, Anna Ord interrupted. I reject his offer. We have more in common with our neighbors than an ancient blood connection through a Pictish tribe, not even related to Djed and certainly not the Gaels. Tell Constantine, if he pursues his plans north we will support the ruler of the land in any countermeasure. That is your official line? Osric was catching on to this king's manner, stuck in the middle. Little time left for influence. Unofficially, I imbue you the wisdom of our line. He should return here and learn of his culture from your family. Find a way to get Owain to safety before Hywel finds a way to eliminate him, or you. And Osric found herself looking back into the face of a man willing to put the fate of 3 kingdoms into her hands, on the basis that she was one of only 2 heirs of the Hair No Lead. She dropped to her knees now, and bowed her head. To anyone else it may have looked like submission, but Osric was making a promise. I swear, kin of my mother, I will do all I can to retrieve Owain ap Diffinwyl, she promised, placing both hands on tagged seeks, which she was making out she was taking back. The king of Gwynedd lowered his head. I accept your word, despite Hywel's lies. He seeks to court the Lady of the Mercens, he added, but his voice was rough, hard, and he took her by the elbow and threw her away from him. So that is where Aethelstan comes in, Osric thought, as Anna Ord pushed her off in the direction of Pailig, and she remembered to hold her face where she had pretended to be hit. And, Anna Ord was making himself deliberately louder now, from the kin of Ethelfrith the Twister, the bastard of Bernicia and the disease-ridden ferret Edwin of Diryu I wish you damnation. Osric hung her head, smiling to the earth, but looked up, concerned, and let Pailig take her arm. I am all right, really, she insisted, taking a glance back up the hill to the granite-expressioned Anna Ord. He really is a piece of a turd, Pailig replied, and made her sit down on a sheepskin fleece. What did he say to you? But Osric shook her head. I have to get away from here, Osric told him, and was surprised that she felt genuinely shaken. Will you will you ask Hywel what I need to do to fulfill his requirement of me, so I may meet my men? I cannot stay in Gwynedd, in Wellies any longer. 88,888,888. The prayers of the Welsh went on a day and Pailig told her he would not move if she wanted to close her eyes and rest on the sheepskin while they waited for Hywel. And so it was the evening, at sunset, when Hywel, flanked by Pailig, came to her. And it was decided, as quickly as that. Hywel has asked her what she could offer, and when she told him, Osric knew by his delighted expression, then it was more than he would have accepted. But it didn't matter, it was all she had. Tonight she would sleep in Gwynedd and tomorrow, Hywel, Pailig and Osric would cross the Dee to the Wirral. 88,888,888. I thank you for your hospitality, Osric said to Hywel, when they got off the small ferry that took them from the tiny settlement dependent on eel fishing and over to, nominally, Mercia. She had looked, with hope, with willing, that her ship with Angus, Phelim and Eswy in it were where the king had said they were going to be. So, when she got out of the trap she was laying for herself, Osric thought that was the next thing to do, find the ship, and sail away from Wellies forever. They had not brought a horse and Osric was slower than she might have been. Pailig reassured her, however, that the bear they were going to was no more than 10 miles. Which meant they reached Brunanburh in the late afternoon, the gold and green goose banner of St. Werburgh flying above it next to the Mercen Saltaire. Well, you wished for information about Aethelstan, Osric told herself. Riley's, above the main fortress gates a boy she knew from her pursuit of her brother peered over it. He was armed, which was good, but alone, which was not. Was Ethelfled really here? Because her plan would fall to nothing if she were not. I have with me a prisoner for your lady Ethelfled, King Hywel told the guards. One leaned over, examining the faces of the visitors, and turned to another on duty. Ethelstan, Osrith noticed, shifted towards the second man. To listen? It would be something she would do, if she were him. Minutes later and the doors were flung open, and Osrith saw the guard. A friend, a dear one. But she maintained the pretense. This warrior says she killed one of your lords. Hywel explained to an astonished Aldhelm. Under the treaty we have with the lady, Hywel continued, we have brought her here for justice. He did not hold put his hand, but his abrupt silence said the same thing, payment was due. Lord King, Aldhelm said, inclining his thin, long neck as he acknowledged the King of Deheubarth. We were not expecting your army. And, nor should you, for I sent not my army. But, I can see you gave plenty of my uncles, the King of Gwynedd sends you, Hywel noted, as grey-cloaked warriors assembled within the walls of Brunanburh. I take it, your lady is here? Hywel added. Indeed, Aldhelm acknowledged and, with a swift look to Osrith, which she knew completely meant, what are you doing? What was she doing? Chancing on her good name in Mercia to free herself from some sort of trap in Deheubarth. She had insisted to Hywel that ice spite, the magical blade, should be used on the warrior harmed by it. Elfrith. Miral. Aldhelm called. Your man, I believe. Osrith turned to Hywel, who was smiling at Osrith, unlike Pylig, who looked as if he was holding his breath. A good quantity of silver was passed to Hywel before he finally closed his hand around it. My lady thanks you, Aldhelm said, and offers you welcome, he told Hywel, but the King of Deheubarth shook his head. This is a diversion from my pilgrimage, he told Aldhelm. I wish to be back to my kin. At this he looked at Osrith, before nightfall. He glanced up to the ramparts where Ethelstan was still staring over, a boy no older than the Owains, Hywel's youngest, and Dyfnwyl's heir. Come, Aldhelm said to Osrith. Father Pylig, if you represent Hywel in this, then please, come too. It looks like I represent Hywel in this, Pylig replied, and stumped after them. 88,888,888. If one could imagine a city as big as Winchester, but walled with two timber-framed ramparts, both decked and with the anti-clockwise watch rotation happening above, that was Brunanburh. A large building in the centre suggested the palace, or whatever Etgilfled had decided to call it, and next to it, a chapel. Stables lay beside kitchens, as in any fortress, and living quarter the other. Osrith looked at it again, feeling a rising disappointment in herself that she was impressed with what Ethelfled had achieved. Osrith followed Miral, who kept looking at Elfrith, across the courtyard while Pylig was escorted inside the hall. Told you something interesting was going to happen tonight, Elfrith told his commander. Osrith has come home to Mercia. But Miral was not so light-hearted and, when they got near the stables, which was barred and clear being used as a prison, he took Osrith's arm and turned her towards him. You fled, he exclaimed, his tone hushed but urgent. Why has the Welsh king brought you here as a prisoner? So I no longer have to be his, Osrith explained. I trust Mercian justice over Welsh justice any day, she told him. But you haven't done anything to warrant Mercia's justice, Miral told her. Have you? Osrith bowed her head in supplication. Murdered Lord Eardulf? She reminded him. Evaded whatever it was Edward wanted me for. Osrith had forgotten what, but she remembered how, and Edward would have, too. It was resolved, Miral told her. The condition being you left Mercia. It is unresolved, I cannot in all conscience continue with it on my soul. I killed Eardulf, and it was not justified to do so. So in exchange for the silver you just provided to King Hywel I must stand before the lady. It had come to her all in a hurry, when she had been resting, after she had spoken to Anna Ord. Eadith deserved more than that, Eardulf, though he had murdered Ethliad, deserved more than that. But ultimately, she could no longer bear it on her conscience. She had wanted to kill her brother but had attacked Eardulf for his casual, offhand killing of poor Heard. She moved to the gate, and looked inside. You cannot be locked in there, not in your condition, Elfrith had said the words before he could stop himself. These are men who fought Utad when their ship got trapped in the Meuse. He brought them in because they were a threat. Miral shook his head too. I will ask for clemency from Ethelfled, Miral furthered, but Osrith had seen who was in the cell. They have been in there a day? Not even a day, Elfrith told them. Can't or won't speak English, nor Saxon either. No favors from the lady, Osrith insisted. The main concern her brain was working on now was that Utad lived and was there. At Brunanburg, I would sleep with their horses, rather than anything Alfred's daughter offers. She moved to the barred gate, where one of the 3 prisoners approached. They are savages, warned Miral, trying to catch her arm, but Osrith, bone-tired, hungry and thirsty, shook him off and stood inches from the prisoner. You know, they have just said you are savages, Osrith told Angus, whose eyes dazzled at her. Except, you were taken in by my brother, so he tells me. She glanced at Miral, so I am willing to guess that it was they not you who were the savages. Osrith. Her name came from both directions at once. Eswi, who had come to stand by Angus, reached through and grasped her hand, almost at a loss for words. She looked back to Miral and Elfrith and smiled. She couldn't help it, people who she cared for and who cared for her stood before her, and behind. Her relief made her want to laugh and gently tease them all. Miral, Elfrith. Elfkin! She exclaimed. Osrith, I do not think, began Miral. What she's trying to tell you, is that we are her warriors, Eswi told him, in English. Of Alba. You know, cold, wild, unassailable by Angles or Saxons? And, I know you are the men who fought with the Calig. He glanced to Osrith. I cannot tell you how good it is to see you without a blade at your throat. Is that bastard inside? I saw him come in with ye. I should have been in their ship, Osrith explained. Instead, I was taken prisoner by Pylig. By Pylig? Miral felt his mouth fall open. He has ... he is just. He acts for King Hywil in this business, Osrith told him, and repeated the same to Angus and Phelim in Cymbric. I murdered a lord, it was true. And he did deserve it, Miral assured Angus, who was glaring at him. How it is you are here requesting a trial for this, I do not know. Because I believe in Ethelfled's cold book justice than I do Hywil's poetic justice. A man lives now, because of me, she sighed. So please, tell the Lady Ethelfled that the prisoner has been detained with the other prisoners, and awaits her pleasure. Miral shook his head. Whatever you are planning, Osrith, he began, but she interrupted him. I see Gwynedians here, she told him. Can you tell me why? I can, Eswi said. Let her in to us, she is our kin as well as yours, he added, as Elfrith narrowed his eyes. Guard her the night, and you will see we are men of Pitland, Strathclyde, Dalriata, true to our words. Elfkin, Miral called. Get Osh here, and Egelfrith. You are guarding your captain tonight.